You know, when your mind just races, and suddenly you're convinced that the tiniest little snag is actually a full-blown catastrophe.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there.
Yeah. And the material you sent over, this Documento Sin Titolo, it really digs into why our thoughts can take these, well, dramatic and often pretty unhelpful turns.
Hmm.
It talks about mental traps, or what people often call cognitive distortions. Okay, so let's unpack this. What are these things, really,
Uh-huh.
in a nutshell?
Well, think of them as these ingrained, almost automatic ways our minds interpret the world. And, often these interpretations aren't entirely accurate.
Yeah.
The document brings up a really interesting point. It's often less about what actually happens to us and much more about how we process those events. That's what impacts our well-being.
Right, how we think about it.
Exactly. And get this, the document mentions that around 90% of the things we worry about,
Yeah.
they never actually happen.
90%. Wow, that's a lot.
It's huge. Think about all that mental energy just spent, worrying about scenarios that don't even materialize.
It really makes you wonder how much unnecessary stress we just load onto ourselves.
Mm.
So the goal for this deep dive, as I see it, is to really get a handle on these sneaky thought patterns,
Hmm.
to understand why they're so powerful, and maybe most importantly, to equip you, the listener, with some concrete evidence-based strategies to navigate them more effectively.
Yeah.
We're talking about clearer thinking,
Yeah.
hopefully stronger relationships, and ultimately just a better quality of life, right?
Exactly. And this document, it outlines 10 specific mental traps that are incredibly common. We're going to explore each one.
10 of them. Okay.
Yeah, look at where they might come from, understand their impact, and crucially, discuss practical solutions,
Mhm.
ways to help you respond to your thoughts in, well, a healthier way.
Brilliant. Let's dive straight in then. The first one, pensamiento catastrófico, or catastrophic thinking. What's the core of this particular trap?
Okay, so this is that tendency for our minds to just leak to the absolute worst case scenario, even when there's little or sometimes no evidence to support such a dire prediction.
Right, straight to disaster.
Exactly. The document gives a vivid example. If my child is 10 minutes late from school, they must have had a terrible accident. It's that immediate jump.
Oof, yeah, that paints a clear picture. I think many of us can relate to that feeling, that sort of spiraling. What's the underlying mechanism here? Why does our brain sometimes default to, like, disaster mode?
Well, the document suggests it's rooted in a kind of hyperactive threat detection system. It's a survival instinct, really, passed down through generations.
Ah, okay, like fight or flight stuff.
Sort of, yeah. In genuinely dangerous situations, anticipating the worst could be life-saving. But the problem is, this system can become oversensitive in our modern lives.
Right, trigger happy.
Exactly, setting off alarm bells even when the actual risk is very low. And the consequences, as you can imagine, are significant.
Like what?
Things like persistent anxiety, difficulty just being present in the moment, and making choices driven more by fear than by, a rational look at the situation.
Okay, so it really affects things. How do we begin to loosen the grip of this catastrophic thinking? What practical steps does the document offer?
It highlights two key approaches. First is probabilidad realista, basically, realistically assessing the probability.
Okay, checking the odds.
Right. Actively looking at the actual likelihood of your worst fear coming true. What are the statistics? What evidence do you actually have? The second is el mejor y el peor escenario, exploring the best and worst case scenarios. This encourages a more balanced view.
So not just the worst.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Consciously considering potential positive or even just neutral outcomes instead of only fixating on that negative extreme.
That makes sense. It's about grounding our fears in reality, maybe, rather than letting them just run wild. Okay, let's move on to the second common trap. Sober generalization. Overgeneralization. Tell us about this one.
Right. Overgeneralization. This happens when we take one negative event, just one, and conclude that it signifies a permanent pattern of failure or defeat.
Ah, okay. Like a here we go again feeling.
Precisely. The example given is, I failed this job interview, I'll never get a job in my field. That jump from one instance to never.
Got it.
And the document makes an interesting point here. Our brains are naturally wired to look for patterns. It helps us be efficient.
A mental shortcut.
Yeah. But this shortcut can sometimes lead us to draw these broad, inaccurate conclusions based on just a single instance or maybe just a couple.
So one setback becomes proof of an unending streak of bad luck, basically. What impact does this kind of thinking have?
Well, it can really contribute to what's known as learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Yeah, the belief that you're just incapable of success,
Hmm.
which in turn can lead you to give up on your goals prematurely. If you're already convinced you'll fail, why even bother trying?
That sounds like a really disempowering cycle.
Yeah.
What interventions does the document suggest for, breaking free from that?
It offers a couple of effective tools. One is linguistic restructuring, basically consciously changing the language we use.
Right.
Instead of using those absolute terms like never or always, try replacing them with more nuanced words like this time or sometime.
Okay, softening the language.
Exactly. The second strategy is creating an evidence log, like a tangible record where you actively note down both positive and negative experiences related to that area.
Oh, interesting, like a reality checklist.
Pretty much. It helps to balance our perspective and challenge that tendency to only remember the negative stuff that fuels the overgeneralization.
Right. Building a more complete, more realistic picture of our experiences, the good and the bad. Okay, our third mental trap is personalization. Personalization. What's the essence of this one?
Personalization is the tendency to hold yourself responsible for events that are largely or sometimes entirely outside of your control.
Taking the blame for everything.
Kind of, yeah. The example given is, my team lost the game because I missed that one shot in the second half. As if that one shot was the only factor.
Right, ignoring everything else.
Exactly. And if we look underneath, the document suggests this can sometimes stem from a deeply rooted childhood need for a sense of control, a way to feel safe and secure.
So feeling in charge makes us feel safe, even when we're not really in charge. What are the potential downsides of thinking like this?
Well, it can lead to excessive feelings of guilt, obviously, and also significant emotional exhaustion, constantly carrying the weight of responsibility for things you can't actually influence. It's a heavy burden.
Yeah, I can
So-
imagine. Absolutely. How can we begin to shift away from this tendency to personalize everything?
The document recommends two helpful techniques. First is multi-causal analysis.
What now?
Multi-causal analysis, basically consciously breaking down an event and identifying all the various factors that contributed to it, not just focusing solely on your perceived role.
Okay, looking at the bigger picture.
Precisely. The second is a really insightful question to ask yourself. What would I advise a friend in this exact same situation?
Oh, that's a good one.
Isn't it? Often we're much more compassionate and objective when we're looking at someone else's challenges.
That's a great way to get some distance and perspective. Okay, moving on to trap number 4. Pensamiento dicotómico, or todo o nada. Dichotomous thinking, often called all or nothing thinking. What's the core of this pattern?
This is when we evaluate our experiences in these really rigid black and white categories. We completely ignore the spectrum of possibilities in between.
Black or white, no gray.
Exactly. A classic example is, if I don't get the top grade, I'm a complete failure. The document highlights that this is essentially an oversimplification of reality, which is often complex and nuanced.
Right, everything is either a total success or a total disaster. No middle ground allowed. What are the potential risks with this kind of thinking?
Well, it can fuel unhealthy perfectionism, for one, and also a very low tolerance for frustration.
Because anything less than perfect is failure.
Exactly. If anything short of absolute perfection is perceived as utter failure, it just sets you up for constant disappointment and self-criticism.
That sounds incredibly draining. What are some healthier alternatives to this all-or-nothing mindset?
The document suggests a couple of helpful approaches. One is escala de grises, literally grayscale evaluation.
Rating it.
Yeah, consciously rating situations on a continuum, maybe from 1 to 10, rather than just slapping a label of good or bad on it.
Okay.
The other is reformulation. So instead of focusing only on the negative extreme, try rephrasing the situation in a more balanced way.
Like how?
For example, instead of, this was a complete failure, you might say, okay, this didn't turn out exactly as I hoped, but, there was some positive aspects I can learn from.
Right. Embracing the complexity, the shades of gray in life.
Right.
Okay. Our fifth mental trap. Filtro mental negativo. The negative mental filter. How does this one work?
This trap involves focusing almost exclusively on the negative aspects of a situation while completely overlooking or dismissing the positive ones, like a filter that only lets the negative stuff through.
So you only see the bad.
Pretty much. The example given is, the presentation went well, but that one small mistake ruined everything.
Focusing on the one tiny flaw.
Exactly. And what's often at play here, the document notes, is the negativity bias. Our brains naturally tend to give more weight and attention to negative information than positive information. It's another survival thing, perhaps.
So one minor hiccup overshadows everything else that went right. What are the potential consequences of constantly using this negative filter?
Well, it can lead to a really distorted self-perception and an inability to truly acknowledge your own achievements.
Because you're always finding fault.
Right. You're constantly dwelling on what went wrong rather than recognizing and appreciating what actually went well.
That can't be good for your self-worth. What are some ways to actively counteract this negative filter? How do we let the good stuff in?
The document recommends deliberate balancing. So for every negative aspect you identify, consciously make an effort to find at least, say, 2 positive ones.
Actively look for the good.
Yes. It also suggests keeping a registro de logros, an achievement log, a diary where you regularly note down your successes, no matter how small they might seem.
Like collecting evidence against the filter.
Exactly. This practice helps to build a more accurate and positive self-assessment over time.
It's about actively training ourselves to see the whole picture, the good and the bad. Okay, trap number 6 is los deberes imperativos, the imperative shoulds. Tell us about these rigid rules we set for ourselves.
Right, the shoulds, these involve holding very firm and often unrealistic expectations about how things should be, both for ourselves and for others.
Like internal rules.
Yeah. Common examples are things like, I should be more successful by now, or I shouldn't make any mistakes.
Big ones.
Definitely. And the document points out that these shoulds often stem from internalizing societal or maybe familial expectations that we haven't really examined or consciously chosen for ourselves.
So we're living by a set of rules we didn't even really agree to. What kind of impact can these shoulds have on us?
Well, they can lead to excessive self-criticism, for one, and a persistent feeling of inadequacy. You're constantly falling short of these rigid, often unattainable expectations.
Which sounds incredibly demoralizing.
It really can be.
Absolutely. How can we begin to dismantle these unhelpful shoulds? How do we get rid of them?
The document suggests making a couple of key shifts. One is just a change in language, consciously replacing the word should with softer, more flexible terms like prefer or choose or would like to.
Okay, changing the wording.
Yeah. The other is about bringing more flexibility to the expectations themselves. Instead of viewing these shoulds as absolute requirements for your worth, try reframing them as desires or goals.
So less of a demand, more of a preference.
Exactly. Like instead of, I should be able to handle everything, maybe try, I'd prefer to be able to handle this, but it's okay to ask for help when I need it.
That takes a significant amount of pressure off just hearing it like that. Okay, our 7th mental trap is lectura de mente, mind reading. How do we fall into this trap of assuming we know what others are thinking?
Yeah, mind reading. This is when we assume we know what other people are thinking or feeling, but without having any actual concrete evidence to back it up.
It's just guessing, basically, but feeling sure about it.
Pretty much. A common example is, they probably think I'm not competent enough. The document suggests that this often arises from projecting our own insecurities onto others.
So our own self-doubts kind of color how we interpret other people's thoughts and actions. What's the impact of this on our relationships and interactions?
Well, it can create significant anxiety in our interpersonal relationships, and it can lead to defensive behaviors too.
Because you're reacting to something that might not even be true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We might react based on our assumptions about what others are thinking, even if those assumptions are completely inaccurate, which, can lead to misunderstandings and conflict.
Yeah, that could definitely create a lot of unnecessary friction. What are some effective ways to break free from this habit of mind reading?
The document offers 2 key strategies. The first is empirical verification, just asking directly instead of making assumptions. Check it out.
Okay, that sounds simple, but maybe a bit scary sometimes.
It can feel a bit vulnerable, yeah. But clear and open communication is often the most direct path to actually understanding someone else's thoughts or intentions. The second strategy is considering alternative hypotheses.
Other possibilities.
Right. Instead of immediately jumping to the most negative interpretation of someone's behavior or reaction, try to consciously think of other plausible reasons for it.
Okay. Opening ourselves up to different possibilities rather than just jumping to conclusions.
Right.
Our 8th mental trap is fallacia de justicia, the fallacy of justice. What's the underlying belief here?
This fallacy is the deeply held belief that life should always be fair and that things should unfold according to our personal sense of what is right and just.
Like life owes us fairness?
Kind of, yeah. The example given is, it's unfair that he's doing better when I work harder. The document points out that this often stems from our inherent resistance to accepting that there are factors beyond our control influencing outcomes.
So we get caught up in how we think things ought to be, rather than just accepting how they sometimes are. What are the potential consequences of clinging to this fallacy of justice?
Well, it can breed feelings of resentment, anger, and a chronic sense of victimhood. Constantly feeling like you're being treated unfairly, it's incredibly emotionally draining.
And probably stops you from moving forward.
Exactly. It can prevent you from focusing on what you can actually influence.
That makes sense. How can we develop a more adaptive perspective when it comes to this idea of fairness?
The document suggests two key shifts. One is focusing on what is within your control, directing your energy towards your own actions and growth, rather than getting fixated on comparisons or perceived injustices.
Put your energy where it counts.
Right. The other is radical acceptance, acknowledging that absolute equity doesn't always exist and learning to accept those realities without letting them consume you.
Okay. Shifting our focus to our own agency and accepting what we can't change. Got it. Our ninth mental trap is razonamiento emotional, emotional reasoning. How does this manifest?
Emotional reasoning is when we take our feelings as direct evidence of objective reality. Basically, I feel it, therefore it must be true.
Oh, okay. Like feelings equal facts.
Exactly. The example provided is, I feel incompetent, therefore I must be incompetent. The document offers a really insightful perspective here, pointing to the neuroscientific basis. It's like a misinterpretation where our emotional brain, the limbic system, kind of overrides our rational brain, the prefrontal cortex.
So our feelings can sometimes trick us into believing things that aren't actually true about the world or ourselves. What are the potential dangers of relying solely on emotional reasoning?
Well, it can lead to impulsive decisions based purely on how you feel in the moment. And it can lead to a significantly distorted self-perception.
Because you believe the feeling over the fact.
Right. If you consistently... It can really negatively impact your self-worth and your choices.
How can we begin to disentangle our feelings from objective truth then? How do we separate them?
The document recommends a clear process of separation, consciously stating, maybe even out loud or in writing, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now, and this is what I know to be true based on the evidence.
Drawing a line between feeling and fact.
Exactly. It also suggests validation without fusion.
Validation without fusion.
Yeah, acknowledging that your emotions are valid experiences. It's okay to feel what you feel, but without believing that they automatically define reality. It's perfectly okay to feel incompetent sometimes, but that feeling doesn't necessarily mean you are incompetent.
Right. Recognizing and validating the emotion without letting it dictate our understanding of reality. Okay. Our 10th and final mental trap is descalificación de lo positivo, disqualifying the positive. How does this one tend to sabotage us?
This is when we consistently minimize or dismiss our own positive experiences, achievements, and qualities. We often come up with reasons why they don't count. It was just luck, or anyone could have done it.
Brushing off compliments or downplaying success.
Exactly. The example given is, anyone could have done this. It has no real merit. The document suggests this can sometimes be a kind of defense mechanism against potential future disappointments.
How so?
Well, the thinking might be if we don't fully acknowledge our successes now, maybe we won't be as disappointed if we face setbacks later on.
Ah, so it's a form of self-sabotage disguised as, like, self-protection. What are the long-term consequences of constantly downplaying our positive aspects?
It leads to a really diminished self-image and a significant difficulty in genuinely accepting praise or even recognizing our own worth.
Because you never let the good stuff sink in.
Precisely. You never truly internalize your successes, which can really hinder your confidence and your motivation over time.
That's a real shame. How can we start to recognize and truly accept our positive qualities and achievements, to let ourselves feel good about them?
The document recommends objective recognition, consciously listing concrete evidence of your skills, your efforts, your accomplishments, like building a case for yourself.
Okay, gathering the positive proof.
Yeah. It also suggests practicing gradual acceptance, allowing ourselves to acknowledge and maybe even feel a little sense of pride in your achievements without immediately finding a reason to dismiss them.
Learning to just sit with the positive.
Exactly. It's
Right.
about learning to accept that you are capable and deserving of success bit by bit.
Okay, wow. 10 traps. It sounds like simply becoming aware of these is the first really crucial step. So what's the key takeaway from understanding all of this?
Yeah, awareness is huge. I think the main takeaway is that these 10 mental traps are incredibly common patterns of thinking. We all fall into them sometimes, but, and this is the important part, they are not set in stone.
They can be changed.
Absolutely. With increased awareness and consistent practice, you absolutely can learn to navigate them more effectively. And the goal isn't really to eliminate negative thoughts entirely. That's probably not realistic for most of us.
Right.
It's more about changing your relationship with them, recognizing them for what they often are, distortions, rather than accurate reflections of reality.
And the document mentions some estrategias de consolidación, ways to really strengthen this new awareness, to make it stick. What are some of those key practices?
Yes, it highlights several important strategies for consolidation. Autoobservation sin juicio, that's self-observation without judgment. Learning to become almost like a detached observer of your own thoughts as they arise.
Just noticing them without getting hooked.
Exactly. Then there's cuestionamiento sistemático, systematically questioning your thoughts, asking yourself things like, is this thought absolutely 100% true? What evidence do I have for it? What evidence contradicts it?
Playing detective with your thoughts.
Kind of, yeah. Then flexibilidad cognitiva, actively cultivating the ability to consider multiple perspectives on a situation, not just your first automatic thought.
Seeing other angles.
Also, autocompassion, self-compassion. Treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd offer to a good friend facing a similar challenge. This is a big one.
Being kind to yourself through it.
Yes. And finally, tolerancia a la ambigüedad. Learning to accept that many situations in life just don't have clear-cut black and white answers. Being okay with uncertainty.
Those are really powerful tools to keep in mind. And there's a quote here from Aaron Beck that really seems to capture the essence of all this. Distorted thoughts are like dark glasses that color our entire experience.
That's a fantastic analogy, isn't it? Because it so clearly illustrates how these mental traps don't actually change the outside world, but they fundamentally alter how we perceive it, how we experience it.
Right. The world stays the same, but our view changes.
Exactly. By learning to recognize and adjust these distortions, we're essentially taking off those dark glasses and seeing things with much greater clarity.
It really does sound like an ongoing process, though. This isn't about finding some quick fix, right? It's more like continuous self-discovery and personal growth.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a destination. Every moment of awareness, every time you consciously pause and question a thought instead of just automatically believing it, that's a step. It's building a healthier, more balanced relationship with your own mind.
So for you, the listener, if you want to explore this further and start applying these ideas in your own life, what are some próximos pasos? What can you do now?
Well, the document offers several practical suggestions to get started. One is keeping a journal of your distorted thoughts for maybe a few weeks. That can be incredibly helpful just in identifying your own recurring patterns.
Seeing them on paper?
Exactly. Practicing mindfulness meditation can also really enhance your overall awareness of your thoughts and feelings, again, without that immediate judgment.
Training that observer muscle.
And, if these patterns feel really deeply ingrained or they're significantly impacting your well-being, seeking support from a mental health professional can be a really valuable step. There's no shame in that.
Good point.
And for further reading, the document specifically recommends Sentirse Bien, which is known in English as Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns. It's a very comprehensive and practical resource in this whole area of cognitive therapy.
Okay, some really actionable steps there for anyone wanting to take this further. Ultimately, it seems like it comes down to this. A well-trained mind, one you understand, can be an incredibly powerful ally.
Definitely.
And by simply recognizing that some of our ingrained ways of thinking might be holding us back, you've already taken that really significant first step, just listening to this, thinking about it.
That initial act of self-awareness is truly encouraging. Now it's about continuing that journey, with both courage, because it does take courage to look at this stuff, and a really good dose of self-compassion.
Be kind to yourself along the way.
Absolutely. It's a gradual process, and every bit of effort you invest, every time you catch a thought, it brings you closer to a more empowered and hopefully a more fulfilling life.